Okay. I hope you can see I'm smiling. Somebody very close to me asked me that I should wear a real mask. Not, I usually wear the visor. But she asked me I should wear a real mask, so yeah, in deference to my wife, so I decided I'm going to listen to her. Ezrat Hashem. It's a good idea, Ezrat Hashem, to do that. I want to thank Rabbi Laniado for being such a vital and incredible institution during such a difficult time.
Amen.
It's very, very special. And Bezrat Hashem, I remember last year having the zchut of being here, and I have to say that, many, many years ago, when we started a kollel, many years ago, there was a fellow who was doing very well financially, and he gave me like a $55,000 check. And then, several years later, he gave me a $5,000 check. And he said to me, Rabbi Brander, when I gave you the $5,000 now, it was much harder for me than when I gave you the $55,000 a few years ago. There's a woman who a lot of people, when you run a Torah institution, so you have to raise money. It's the way it works. Money, it's an important thing when you run a Torah institution to have money. It's usually a good thing. It helps. I remember one time that the lights turned off. The lights actually turned off several years ago. And I knew why those lights turned off. And wow, this is like such a... So one woman recently... Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of people that give money in different amounts. A woman gives us $36 a month. But before we could run the credit card, she calls up to say if she could make that month. And a few days ago, she left a message. She said, Rabbi Brenda, I'm going to do it this month. Please wait till the 4th of the month to give the $36. She can't do the credit card right away. Wait till the 4th of the month. So why am I telling you? What does that have to do with this? So last year I think it was a little bit of a bigger crowd. But every single person that's here tonight, the Mesirut Nefesh of each and every one of you that's here tonight, it's worth so much. Because people are afraid to come and to stay up at night, etc., etc. And to be able to have it, we're all coming together properly, that we're making sure we're taking care of ourselves with. We can't abandon taking care of ourselves. Our Gidolim, no matter who they are, Ashkenazim, Sfaradim, they were taking care of ourselves with putting on our mask, with being careful. But we're still pushing ourselves. Because there's greatness in pushing ourselves. It's a great and beautiful thing. Ashreichem, Ashreichem, Ashreichem. May this beautiful Torah institution continue to flower, continue to grow. Bezrat Hashem, it should be uprooted very, very soon and be brought to Yerushalayim Mir HaKodesh B'meher B'yameinu Amen. So I want to learn with you one thing. I think last year I spoke a little bit about this Rambam also, but I want to talk about a Rambam in a little bit of a different way. You know that there's when we were all children, those of us that went to yeshiva, they used to say, okay, give me 4 names for Pesach, and 4 names for Shavuot, then 4 names for Sukkot. They always have a bunch of names, a lot of names. So everybody knows the holiday that we're almost finished with is called Sukkot. And some people know it's called Zeman Simchatenu, right? We know that. Those 2 we know. But we also know it's called Chag. But there's another name, which is actually the first name in the Torah for this holiday. And that is the name known as, please feel free to respond. What's that? Water is a good thing. What's that? It is such an unpopular name, even though it's in the Torah, and even though, listen, most of us are sleeping, but in a few people that are awake, by the way, I hope nobody should mind, falling asleep on Mashiach for me, the big zchut, because then you get menuchata nefesh and menuchata guf. You know the story about there was a famous Christian pastor who, whenever he would say a drasha, so right away in the front there was a guy that would right away get into like the fetal position and like he'd snore. Every rabbi has one guy who would we don't mind they sleep. The snoring is the part that's hard, So this Christian pastor decided that he was going to get back at this guy. So one day he gets up and we're all true to form, true to form, that guy, like he started snoring. So he decided, that's it. He goes, okay, ladies and gentlemen. He turned to them and he said, every single person that wants to go to heaven, please stand up. So he's sleeping. Everybody stands up. And this guy's sleeping, so they all look at him and he's sleeping and he's sitting, and they're all standing and they're laughing at him. And then he says, and every single person who wants to go to Gehenna, he uses the other word, but I usually use that word. Every person who wants to go to Gehenna, please stand up! And he yells, stand up! And that guy, all he hears is, stand up! And then they all sit down, and all he hears, stand up! So he quickly gets up, the guy who's sleeping stands up, and everybody's sitting. And they're having a great time. He's groggy. He looks around, and they're all sitting. And he turns to them and he says, Pastor, I don't know what cause you are advocating. I don't know what cause you're talking about, he said. But it seems like only you and I are standing. So, we're all standing together. And if you want to fall asleep, it's all right, no problem, even after that joke. I'm not going to play that joke on you. But Lema'aseh, once we're already up, and it's Hoshanah Rabah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is looking, let me ask you a question. And there are some people in this room who are up, and it's 12:20. And when they used to be in my class, many years ago, at 12:20 in the middle of the day they were sleeping. So they're doing much better. So, what's the name of the holiday that the Torah gives? Chag HaAsif. The holiday of collecting. The holiday of collecting. Gathering. And we all know on a simple level, why is it called Chag HaAsif? On a simple level, why is it called Chag HaAsif? Because you're gathering in the bounty, the grapes, the wheat, the oil, the pomegranates, the mangoes, all the fruits that they have at the Persian weddings that none of us Ashkenazim know what they are exactly, with the different things, whatever it is. The Persian lemons, all the others, all the good stuff. When the Ashkenazim leave the wedding and the Persian Lamaisa, right? We're gathering all the stuff, and we have it. And when you have it, and you know it's in the silo, it's already there. You feel much better. And that's why the Torah, on a simple level, that's why the Torah calls it Zeman Simchatenu. 3 times the Torah uses the word Simcha when it comes to Sukkot. How many times does the Torah use the word Simcha by Pesach? 0. And by Shavuos, 1. But when it comes to Sukkot, when you have it already, you feel much better. And that's why many of the Rishonim explain why is that Hashem says go into the Sukkah on the holiday of Sukkot? Because don't feel so overconfident, because you might have it, but you can lose it. The Sukkot is recognize that all the good stuff in life come from Hashem. But we know that everything that Hashem gives us, even a holiday called Chag HaAsif, is not only to be understood in a very simple level. There is always a deep and deeper level of understanding the Torah. You know that there was a man by the name of Shlomo HaMelech, I think you heard of him. And you know that we have a minhag that on Pesach we read from a book known as Shir HaShirim. Shir HaShirim is the book known as the Song of Songs. And Shlomo HaMelech wrote that book. He wrote the book when he was a young man. And then there's another book which is called Kohelet. And that book of Kohelet, he wrote that book when he was an older man. You know that the English word for Kohelet is Ecclesiastes. I don't know what that word means exactly. But it's a book, it's a word that the book of Kohelet is all about life. And Shlomo says, and I saw this, and I thought it was good, and it wasn't that good. And then I saw this, and it was good, and it wasn't that good. It was vanity of vanities, Hakol Hevel. And he says, for everything there's a time. There's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry, a time to eulogize, a time to dance. Eight milchama, eight shalom. We have 28 words in Kaddish for the 28 different times of life. And Kohelet is the book that we read for the Ashkenazim. We read this book in the holiday of Sukkot. Now that doesn't seem to make that much sense. After all, what does it have to do with what we call the holiday of Simcha? Kohelet is all about the difficulties and the challenges, the ups and the downs of life. What is it about? What's the depth of the concept of Chag HaAsif? And how does it connect to Zman Simchateinu? Of course we know on a very simple level, I have it, I have the money. But I know many people that have the money and have lost it. You can still have it and still lose it. What does Chag HaAsif have to do with Zman Simcha? So I want to share with you something very deep that I heard from my Rabbi. You know, Kohelet, which is the book that Shlomo Melech wrote when he was an older man. When you're older, you begin to gather. Asif means to gather. When you're young, you don't really think too much about what's going on in life. So, for example, I have, Baruch Hashem has given me a zchut. I have grandchildren, beautiful grandchildren. I recently digitized my old camcorder, VHS. If somebody needs to know what those words mean, I'll tell you afterwards. It used to be something called a phone. It was attached to the wall. When I was growing up, I grew up in the BCE, before the cell phone era. So when I was growing up, so you said something called a camcorder. You attach it to your shoulder. Sometimes it would be light. You remember that, Pinchas? Just you and I, we're the only ones. Even the rabbi doesn't know. He's a young man. But the older. So I recently digitized the Brit of my Bechor, and he's 30. The bar mitzvahs and the weddings, the beautiful things. And my granddaughter looks at me and she says, Sida, you used to have black hair? And I thought to myself, what do you mean, I don't have that anymore? And then I remember that a lot of my students walk into our house and they go into the hall and there's a wedding picture, and sometimes they'll say, Rab, who's the guy in the picture next to your wife? Who's the guy in the picture next to your wife? So when you get a little bit older, you begin to realize that life isn't forever. And that you have to think about, what are you gathering in life? What are you gathering in life? What are you collecting? Now some people here, even if you're not as old as me, you hit the big 2-0, or the big 2-5, or even the big 3-0, you begin to realize life isn't forever. And you begin to ask yourselves the difficult questions. Am I going in the way that will give me great simcha? And sometimes the answer to that question is, I don't think so. And then you begin to feel bad. Then you begin to feel, what's going to be? And you feel inside of you a depression. I remember, I used to have a student of mine, he couldn't sit down. He was all over he was jumping all over the place. Especially in my class, he was totally out, he was bouncing off the walls. And a few years later, he's about 25 now, fast forward, he's about 7-8 years. I was walking in my neighborhood and he was sitting down, he was half asleep. And I said to this boy, I said, what's going on? He said, Rebbe, he said, it's hard for me to even get up in the morning. He was depressed. He was clinically depressed. We know that the Arizal writes that there are 4, not only the Arizal, but there are 4, he says there are 4 Yisodot. There are 4 fundamental foundations of the Jewish character. There's Afar, there's Ruach, there's Mayim, and there's Eish. Afar, dirt, dust. Ruach, wind. Eish, fire. Mayim, water. Right? We're in the holiday of the water. Chav nidonim alamayim. But said the Arizal, Afar represents the midah of the Yetzer Hara, which is represented by atzvut, sadness, yeush, giving up hope. And said Rav Wolbe, the Arizal actually said this, that when a person doesn't feel simcha, the natural state of a human being, the natural state of the body, is sadness. One of the most, what does it take to be sad? It takes being human. What does it take to be happy? Superhuman. To be above human. To be besimcha means that you are an Oved Hashem. To be besimcha means that you think about life deeply. If you think about life and you don't have the perspective of being an Oved Hashem, life is extremely depressing. Most of the day, you work, and when you don't work, you sleep. When you don't sleep, you go to the bathroom, and when you don't sleep and go to the bathroom and work, you eat. And some people might think, well, eating is good. Well, the truth is, eating can be pleasurable, but at the end of the day, if you don't eat, you're going to die. So you have to eat anyway. So I don't mean to depress anybody, if I haven't depressed you yet, but the fact is, the Rambam tells us, when you talk about the holiday of Sukkot, you actually are talking about simcha for life. Listen to the words of the Rambam. And what I want to talk about now, the next 7 or 8 minutes, is really the most important idea in my mind, how to live life. So what I'm going to say now is not a Dvar Torah, which is true, it is a Dvar Torah, but it's really about how to live a life of simcha. Because if you do not plug in to the superhuman midah of simcha, you are bound to be depressed, and that's why most of the world tries very hard to get rid of its depression by taking many different types of drugs. Now, please don't get me wrong. Sometimes we have to take drugs, and if you have to take it, that's what Hashem wants. But much of the world is interested in putting themselves out of their misery. You know, there's a joke, but it's a true story. There was a very famous comedian in England in the 1800s by the name of Grimaldi. You can Google him, Grimaldi, Grimaldi, Grimaldi. And they tell the story that one time a fellow, during this period of time of Grimaldi, he was a very famous and funny comedian, a fellow once went to a psychologist or a therapist, whatever they were at the time, the 1800s, and he said, "I'm feeling so depressed. What do I do?" So the therapist said, "There's a famous comedian in our country. His name is Grimaldi, and you should go and listen to him. He makes people laugh. It's great, and that's going to help you a lot." So the guy says, "It's not going to work." So the therapist said, "I'm telling you, it helps all the time. It's going to work. It's going to work." He said, "I'm telling you, it's not going to work." So the therapist said, "Why do you say that? Go and see Grimaldi. It's very, very funny." So the guy says, "Because I am Grimaldi." You know how many comedians are depressed? Like all of them. Okay, not you, except for Dan. I would say he's not that funny, but he is very funny. I know that for a fact. He's very funny. So the point is like this. The whole world is laughing. The whole world is laughing because they really are crying. Or they're taking drugs to put themselves out of their misery. And we have something very, very important. We have to read a Rambam. And this Rambam that we're going to learn together, you know the Rambam was an Ashkenazi Jew, right? You know that? We converted him after he left the world. What's that?
Another Gilgul.
You know I'm smiling underneath it, so you can tell I'm smiling, right? So I have to keep you up. I have to keep you up. That's the bottom line. So you're doing pretty good, by the way. I hope I don't fall asleep before you fall asleep. So listen to what the Rambam says. Because Chag HaAsif, which is the holiday of gathering, is not only about gathering the grain. It's about understanding what you're gathering in life. What are you collecting in life? Yesterday I had a zechut, our children and our grandchildren are here. So we went to a place called Oxnard. We found a beautiful spot near the ocean, and my wife and my grandson, who's about 2 years old, so they tell me, and for the first time in his life, because he lives in Lakewood, New Jersey, which is a little bit different than Oxnard, California, which is where we went, and imagine this beautiful scene, the beautiful blue water and the sand, and my wife takes this little boy, this 2-year-old, very happy boy, and she takes him right next to the water with his bare feet. And for the first time in his life, he experienced the ocean, the water of the ocean on his feet. Like, it gets like cold, it's like that cold, and this like 2-year-old gets this cold, and it's like cold, and then all of a sudden he smiles. And for me, that was like a beautiful moment of gathering. What does it take to have a 2-year-old grandson who's happy? It takes, it takes a few years to get to that place. And I had a big inner simcha. And then we had a picture. We went to this place called Underwood Farms yesterday, which is a farm that only the Jews go to. They spend a lot of money to get in, and then they spend a lot of money to pick the vegetables, more money than it would have cost to go to Gotmart. And then but it's still a lot of fun. And I had at this beautiful farm, we had all of our grandchildren were there, and somebody took a picture. My daughter took a picture of all of our grandchildren, and I saw the picture today, and it gave me a lot of simcha. And I have my oldest granddaughter. She's 8 years old, and a few weeks ago she said to me, we were speaking on a Friday or Thursday, and she said, Zayda, I went and I made 7 pans of potato kugel, 8-year-old girl. She said, I peeled 28 potatoes. I said, wow, she peeled more potatoes today than I peeled in my whole life. And when I peeled the potatoes, by the time I finished peeling, there's like nothing left of the potato, because I never know how to do it right. It's like this other spot, and you try more and more and more. So I haven't figured it out yet. So in life, there's a lot of moments that how did this happen? Right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, the gathering. So listen to what the Rambam says. The Rambam, when he talks about the mitzvah of simcha, he tells us that Sukkot is a time of simcha yitera, a time of extra simcha. He doesn't tell us why. He tells us, and I mentioned this point last year, I assume you remember everything of the shir last year. He tells us that the special mitzvah of simchat beit ha-shoeva that they would have on Sukkot, they would gather together, and only the Torah scholars would be the ones that would be allowed to dance and sing, and they would play the instruments, and then the Torah scholars would dance. They wouldn't just dance, they would dance with their legs, and they would clap, and they would play, and they would play bongo, and they would play the different, they'd have a jam session, and everybody else had to watch. And the rabbis would dance, and the Rambam says, listen to this, he says, this simcha, which was not allowed for everybody, just the Gedolei Chachmei Yisrael, Rashi Yeshivot, Sanhedrin, Chasidim, etc. Kol Ha'am would watch. And then the Rambam, all of a sudden, listen carefully, Chevra, here we go, here's the vart, just for this vart here. HaSimcha sheyismach ha'adam ba'asiyat ha'mitzvah u'ba'avat ha'el shetziva bahen. The simcha that a person needs to feel when you are doing any mitzvah. All of a sudden, the Rambam went from Sukkot to life. From Sukkot to life. The Rambam, all of a sudden, he switched gears. All of a sudden, he's not speaking about the Beit HaMikdash. He's not speaking about Simcha. He's not speaking about Sukkot. He's speaking about life. That's what the Rambam does here. And he says, the Simcha that a person needs to feel is Avodah Gedolah. It's a very hard job. Avodah Gedolah. It's a big job. It's hard. You think it's easy to be happy? There's a very special Jew here. Some of you probably know. His name is Ephraim Shor. Ephraim Shor is a man he's like the ambassador of joy. He has a website, livingwithjoy.com. He woke up one morning, about 10 years ago, on Rosh Hashanah. He woke up from being a person who could walk to a person that was paralyzed. And he almost died within a few days. He had Guillain-Barré syndrome. To this very day, he cannot walk from here to there without great effort. He can swim. This is a man whose simcha, one day maybe I'll feel it for a moment. He lives life with incredible joy, but it's a big avoda. What is the avoda of simcha? The Rambam tells us, listen carefully. And somebody that refrains from the simcha, he'll have to pay the price. And the Rambam quotes the famous pasuk in Parshat Ki Tavo, because you did not serve Hashem your God with happiness and with good-heartedness. And if you are into your own kavod, and he feels so like, it's all about me. What's going to happen? The Rambam says he's chote v'shote. He's both a sinner and he's a fool. And this is why Shlomo HaMelech tells us, don't be al titader lifnei melech. Don't make yourself so grand before the king. And somebody who lowers himself, listen carefully. And a person who lowers himself when he has to lower himself. The biggest loser. The biggest loser is the biggest winner. He's the one that's the most honored. David Melech, he saw when he was dancing. When King David was dancing, when the Sefer Torah was coming back after all this time. And he dances, and his wife Michal thought that he didn't look so good. He was dancing like, the Persian dancing at the chasana, right? He was dancing. I don't know exactly how to do it, and I don't want to do it for that. But he was dancing. And the Rambam says, and the Rambam quotes the pasuk, Unikalosi od mizos. He turns to Michal and he says, if I halavai, I should be. If only I'd be even less in your eyes. I wish I could dance even more. I had a friend of mine, he's still alive, Baruch Hashem, but when he would dance at a chasana, by the time he would start with he looked like me, with the jacket and the tie and the hat and the whole thing. By the time he was finished dancing, the jacket was gone, and the tie was gone, and the shirt, I don't know exactly what was going on with the shirt, and he was all over this mitzvah. And I remember that my friends, some of the Rabbanim would think, it's not so appropriate. And I didn't agree with that. He was dancing with the greatest simcha. And he felt this incredible need to be able to misamech chatan mikala. And the Rambam writes, Ve'ein hagidula v'akavod ela l'smoch l'fnei Hashem. Greatness is to feel simcha, listen carefully, before Hashem. Shenemar v'amelech David mifazez u'micharker l'fnei Hashem. What's the Rambam doing? What's the mitzvah of Simcha? The mitzvah of Sukkot. Usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokechem. What does Simcha mean? Simcha means that you are in the presence of Hashem. Let me share with you a story or two. There was a great rabbi, his name is Rabbi David Schrenk. They wrote a book about him just recently. He passed away maybe a year and a half ago. The book is called Just Love Them. And basically, the book is about 180 pages. The whole book is summarized in one page. Learn how to love everybody, even if they're annoying, and find what the great points, and then you'll be able to be a very inspiring Jew. So this Rabbi David Schrenk was an amazing Rebbe. Amazing Rebbe. He loved his Talmidim, and the Talmidim loved him, and he brought out their greatness. So there's one little story. I don't know why. This story meant a lot to me. It's amazing stories. The book must have 400 stories. This one story, when I was reading it, it stuck to me. He used to go to a camp in the summer called Camp Monk, which is named for the Monk family. It was a Jewish camp, a very firm Jewish camp. And he would go every morning, wake up early, go to the pool, which was doubled as the mikvah, and then he would quickly get dressed, and he'd get up early, and he would daven. Before the daven, he'd clean the Beit Midrash, and he was a very, very special person. And one particular shacharit, before shacharit, he was like an hour early, and he sees a young girl, 6-year-old girl, one of the children of one of the camp staff, and she's trying to get an egg. It's a cafeteria, camp kitchen, a big hot pot of eggs. And she's taking an egg, and she's trying to crack it, but it's too hot, like the egg's really hot. So he's walking to shul, and he sees this girl, Yehudis, her name is. And he says to her, Yehudis, let me show you something. Rabbi Trank's probably that time, I guess, is like 60 years old. She's a 6-year-old girl. And he takes the egg, he goes into the kitchen, and he takes a bowl, and he fills the bowl with cold water. And he puts the egg in the cold water, and they're both watching the egg for like a minute. They're watching the egg. Then he takes the egg out of the pot, and he spins the egg around, spins the egg. And at some point he cracks it, and it, like just one crack, right? And then it comes out perfect, right? And he gives her the perfect egg, and she smiles this big smile, and she also knows how to do it the next time. And then he goes on to daven. He goes on into the daven in the Beis Medrash. And in the book it says, and this was one of Rabbi Trank's hachanas. The word hachana means preparation. This was one of his hachanas before davening. What does that mean? This was one of his hachanas before davening. Listen carefully, because this is really the essence of the word. You see, usually when I say, what's your hachana before davening? You think, okay, I have to say all the korbanot, and I have to think very, very deeply. But what was Rabbi Trank's hachana before davening? He wasn't planning on helping a 6-year-old girl with her egg. But Hashem put that in front of him. You see, much of life you can't prepare for. Much of life happens without you knowing it. But if you realize and recognize that if Hashem put it in front of you, then that's what Hashem wants you to do. You see, how much of your life is sitting in the Beit Midrash? Maybe, Mirta Hashem, it should be most of your life. But for most people, they're out and about. So you're running around to the store. Before Sukkot, I thought I had so much time. But there was another table that needed to go in. And there was a ladder. And there was a Shabbos clock. And I couldn't find the Shabbos clock. So I went around to this and that. And before you know it, like you're running to shul. Right? All this. So what? All that didn't count? All the preparation didn't count. I'm going to the dry cleaner. None of that counts. It's only the davening. It's only the learning. So 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the day only counted. That's all. Chas v'shalom. Hashem says to you and I, if you take a moment and realize that all of life, what's in the sukkah? You eat, you drink, you sleep. What's in the sukkah? Most people wouldn't say it's a mitzvah. Animals eat, sleep. Why are we any different? The answer is, that's exactly what a sukkah is. A sukkah is the way a Jew eats, and the reason a Jew eats. And what does a Jew do when they're eating? Not only do they make a bracha, they think, thank you Hashem. And I really enjoy this pastrami sandwich. For those of you that don't know what a pastrami sandwich is, it's like the Ashkenazi version of Gemeh, of Tadig. That's the only thing that we enjoy is pastrami. We don't really have such an expanded menu. So the thing is, and I never really understood why Asa was wanted to sell his Bechorah until I tasted Adasi. And then I understood a little bit better. And I'm not going to get into Talk Me More and all these other stuff. I was in Western for many years, so I got a whole chinuch of what it means to eat person food. I'm in. So the thing is like this. If a person realizes that when they eat and they drink, and sometimes when they cry, because the Gemara says in Brachot Daf Samach or something like that, Samach or Samach, the Gemara says that even when a person suffers terrible news, they have to do it b'simcha. That's what the Gemara says. I didn't make it up. And Rashi says b'simcha means lifnei Hashem. And you realize that there's no part of your life that's really separated from Hashem. And if you have that dot, and the Rambam says, what is the dot you need? The dot is Tachat asher lo avadeta et Hashem lokecha b'simcha b'tuv leivav me'rov kol. What does the Gemara Nedarim say? What does it mean? Mechoser kol? Mechoser kol means without thinking, without doubt. If you live life mindlessly, then life is depressing. And if life is depressing, you need to take a lot of drugs to get through life. But if you realize that every moment of your life, there was a great Ashkenazi rabbi, his name was the Kloisenberger Rebbe, a great Hasidic Rebbe, and it was right after the war, he went through the Gehenna and the Holocaust, and it was Yom Kippur in 1945, and he was sitting in his room, the first Yom Kippur he's going to have in a few years, and he's sitting in his room, and there's a knock at the door, and there's a girl, and she says, Rebbe, my father usually gives me a beautiful bracha on Yom Kippur, and I have Yom Kippur, but he's no longer in the world. Can you give me a bracha? And the Rebbe was like in the middle of his whole preparation. And he says, of course I can give you a bracha. And he takes a cloth and he puts he puts his hand on top, and he gives her a beautiful bracha, which we give in Erev Yom Kippurim. Then he goes back to his preparation. And there's another knock on the door, and there's a young lady, and she says, Rabbi, my father's no longer alive. Can you give me a bracha? He says, of course. 84 girls came to his room on Erev Yom Kippur. And that's all he did. What does it mean to be besimcha? Here's the definition. Besimcha means you realize everything in your life can be gathered and collected in your avodat Hashem. Everything in your life. And if you're not sure where something belongs, it just means you haven't figured out how to incorporate it. Your struggles. Anybody here have any struggles? Don't raise your hand. As my friend Ephraim Shor says, every single person that you are talking to has a struggle you know nothing about. Nothing about. And you know how I know that? Because that says the Vilna Gaon is why you're here in this world. So if you're here in this world, you must have a struggle. And if you want to understand and appreciate what it means to be besimcha, it means a moment of victory over your struggle. It doesn't mean you're always going to win. But if you're fighting, and you have a moment of victory, isn't that the sweetest simcha in the world? You know that there are people, we don't need to talk about this so much, but there are people that have difficulty and challenges because of the internet. They're looking at the wrong things. I know that because many people have shared that with me. And sometimes I can't believe where it comes from. People who I wouldn't expect it. But it's a big challenge. And it's not a challenge that I grew up with, because I didn't have the internet in the same way that many of the Chavra here had. And it's an amazing struggle that they have. And I tell them something that I heard from a great rabbi. Something that I heard myself from a great rabbi. He said, tell them that even if they're not successful all the time, but every moment and every time they succeed, that's an amazing accomplishment. You see, the Yetzer Hara tells you, if you're only successful 80% of the time and you fail 20% of the time, you're a failure. That's the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Tov says, you're struggling and you're in the game and you were successful once and twice and 3 times and then you failed. Don't discount your successes. In a lot of these anonymous programs, they tell you that if you're just only as good as your last drink. So you had 3 years of being sober and then you fell, so they're like, you're nothing again. Chas v'shalom. You're not a nothing. You had 3 years of victories and then you fell. So pick yourself up again. It's not so simple to do. You understand what I'm saying? What does it mean to be besimcha? The Rambam tells us to be besimcha means that I recognize that every single part of my life, it's a big avoda. And sometimes it feels like I'm disgracing myself. I'm disgracing myself. I'm in front of the Torah and I'm disgracing myself because it's really, there's a little bit of ugliness that we all have. It's called the Yetzer Hara. But I'm fighting it. And how do I fight it? Meirov kol. Meirov kol means I have to think about it. I walk into a Beit Knesset, I say this a lot. I'm a rabbi. But if I come to shul 5 minutes before tefillah, I think that's a victory. If I come to shul a minute before tefillah, I think that's a victory. But my father, he still didn't be well. He's an older man already. If the minyan starts 7:30 in the morning, he's already in the car at 7 o'clock. He's sitting in his seat 20 minutes before. Americans, and I'm an American. If the minyan's 7:30 and I'm there 7:29 and a half, I'm very early. So how are we going to possibly appreciate tefillah if we're only there 5 minutes late and we're rushing with our tefillin? Da'at, says Rav Volbe, means I have time to think. I have time to connect to things. How do you achieve simcha? By thinking about life. When's the last time you went into a car and didn't turn something on? Like, just think. When's the last time you just walked down the street and you didn't have something in your ears? When I was growing up, if I was walking down the street and someone else walking the street and they waved to you or they were speaking, you knew they were talking to you. Now, it happens, I do this, everybody else. I'm walking the street, I only walk when I'm on the phone, and somebody says hello to me, and I go, like, you can't even tell that I have a phone, because it's such a good earpiece, I can't even tell. So they're talking to me. So what happened? Nobody thinks. We're always in a rush. So how are we going to have simcha? Because we're never in a space of appreciation. Chag ha'asif. What do you have in life? I want to give you a homework assignment. So yesterday, I told you I went away. So my wife, we have 2 cars. We have a new car. The new car is 2007, and the old car is like 2002. So my wife says that the new car is not working so well. So it's making funny noises. Okay, we'll use the old car. So we use the old car, and then we go to where we went to. And my son had a different car he borrowed, and that car died. I think they left the battery on, whatever it was, left the light on. So he said to Abba, do you have cables? I said, I don't have cables. No, this car I have cables. This is the other car, you didn't have cables. This car had cables. So it could have been an hour, it was a minute. So I said, thank you, Hashem. You think we all don't have moments like this? Write it down. Put it in a Google Doc. Share it with yourself. Write down when you see that you're Lifnei Hashem. Write down your victories. Write down your struggles. The Hoshanah Rabah says, if a person wants to live life again, and they can't live life again because that's not the way Hashem created us, unless it's Gilgul, and then you don't remember what you went through, so then write down your victories and write down your struggles. Live with da'at. Live with da'at. Living with da'at is living with Bnei Hashem. That's what the Rambam is telling us. You want it. It's not just about Sukkot. The Rambam is not. This is all about life itself. Simcha means I appreciate what I'm gathering in life. Simcha means how much have I progressed. Somebody's like, I'm 40 years old, I'm 50, what have I gathered? Well, guess what? If you just think a little bit, I used to be 20 years ago, I didn't appreciate davening, I didn't appreciate learning. So now it's true I don't use my time as well as I should, but I've grown. Thank you, Hashem, I've grown. Don't only come on Yom Kippur and say, Hashem, this is my failings. Come on Yom Kippur and say, Hashem, look how I've grown in the last year. You think the Yetzer Tov wants you to be a miserable, depressed person? The Yetzer Hara wants you to be a miserable, depressed person. The Rambam says, you want to be a Jew that's growing? How are you going to overcome the natural depression of life? What's going on in the world? The Rambam says, you live b'simcha. How do you live b'simcha? You live b'nei Hashem. How do you live b'nei Hashem? You think about life. What have I gathered? Am I making the wrong decisions? If I'm making the wrong decisions, maybe I'm not gathering, want to gather, stop. Make a mid-course correction. You have to think, da'at b'nei Hashem. There's much more to say. I told the rabbi 45 minutes, but it was a rabbinic 45 minutes. So I want to give everybody a bracha. That on this very beautiful and meaningful Tikkun Leil Hoshanah Rabah, which we have in the Svarim, is a time of din, a time of judgment. Pit Katava, we give the bracha, right, where everything is finally, it's written, it's being put into the kvittel, it's being put into the petek. We tell Hashem, we know we have where to grow, but we have a plan. And in our plan, it's to live b'simcha. And living b'simcha means we live with you. And living with you means that we're going to think about life. And we're going to think about where you are in our life. And we're going to grow more and more, greater dveikut. And then Be'ezrat Hashem, every year, a little bit stronger, a little bit more recognition. I'm not only with you, Hashem, in the Beit Knesset and in the Beit Midrash. I'm with you wherever when I'm walking on the street, when I turn away from the billboard, when I'm thinking in my head what I can do a chesed for somebody else. I'm always l'fnei Hashem. You're always l'fnei Hashem. Then you're always going to be in a state of simcha. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should merit to live b'simcha tamid. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should merit to always feel that closeness in every part of our life. Amen.